The vastness of space stretched endlessly before the Imperial fleet as it made its way toward Earth. The fleet was an imposing sight, a massive armada of warships, drones, and battle cruisers, each one brimming with weapons and troops. They moved with purpose. Their destination, clear Earth, was to be their next conquest, a mere stepping stone in the expansion of their empire. The commanders aboard the flagship were confident they would crush this primitive world. In mere hours, the human race had no chance against the might of the Empire. The Emperor himself had decreed that Earth would fall quickly and decisively. Earth had long been considered insignificant by the galactic powers, a backwater planet lost in the far reaches of space, its people primitive and unaware of the vast civilizations that existed beyond their world. The Empire had made a fatal mistake in underestimating humanity. They believed that they could simply sweep and conquer and claim the resources of Earth without resistance, but they could not have been more wrong. Beneath the surface of Earth, a secret was brewing. For decades, governments and military leaders had been preparing for something the people did not know about. They had been building advanced technology in hidden facilities scattered around the globe. Humanity had learned from the mistakes of others, had watched as countless planets fell to the might of more advanced species, and had decided they would never let that happen to them. As the Imperial fleet drew closer to Earth, the world's leaders held their breath, waiting for the inevitable invasion. But they were not without hope. Across the globe, military leaders, scientists, and engineers had been working together in the shadows of society, creating weapons and systems that the Empire would never see coming. Earth's defenses were more than just a collection of advanced technology. They were a reflection of humanity's resilience and ingenuity. These were not just machines of war. These were the creations of people who understood the value of survival and were willing to fight for it at all costs. As the Imperial fleet neared the atmosphere, Earth's defenses silently sprang into action. Hidden orbital platforms powered up and weapons activated across the planet's systems were online and ready to go. All of humanity's efforts were about to be tested, but the invaders had no idea what was coming. As the first Imperial ships crossed into the Earth's atmosphere, their commanders were certain it would be an easy landing. They had no reason to suspect anything other than a swift victory. But the moment the ships entered the atmosphere, everything changed. Earth's first line of defense came in the form of a sudden blackout. An electromagnetic pulse sent across the planet instantly disabled the Imperial fleet's advanced communication and navigation systems. The invaders were caught completely off guard. Their ships lost contact with each other as they drifted aimlessly through space. Panic spread throughout the fleet. Commanders scrambled to reestablish control, but it was too late. Earth had made its move. The Imperial fleet was left stranded in the sky, confused and vulnerable. They tried to regain control of their ships, but the Earth had a secret that they had not anticipated. Their systems had been designed to disrupt and destroy advanced technologies. The invaders had no way of knowing how deep the preparation ran or just how much Earth had been preparing for this day. Now they were beginning to realize that they had underestimated their prey in ways they could never have imagined. The Imperial fleet was in chaos. The sudden blackout had left the invading force disoriented and unable to coordinate their movements. Commanders shouted orders at each other, but their communication systems were down. The ships drifted aimlessly in space, unable to regain control. As the seconds ticked by, the panic grew louder among the invaders. They had never faced anything like this before. Their advanced technology was supposed to make them unstoppable, but now they were helpless against an unknown enemy. On Earth, military leaders watched the unfolding events with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. The first part of the plan had been executed flawlessly, but the next steps would determine whether humanity could hold its ground. The Earth's defense network was not just about the electromagnetic pulse. It was a series of carefully laid out strategies that relied on the element of surprise and the ingenuity of Earth's people. The world's governments had spent years working together on this secret initiative, and now it was time to see if it would be enough to stop the Empire. As the Imperial fleet struggled to regain control of its ships, the Earth's defense systems sprang into action. Orbital weapons platforms, hidden in space, powered up. Their advanced targeting systems locked onto the invaders' ships one by one and fired high-powered energy blasts that tore through the invaders' vessels with surgical precision. The attacks were swift and efficient, leaving no time for the invaders to react as explosions lit up the sky. The fleet's already shattered morale plummeted further, their confidence crumbled. The Imperial commanders were in disbelief. How could this primitive world have such advanced weapons? How could their fleet be under attack from an enemy they had never even considered a threat? Panic set in as they ordered evasive maneuvers. But it was too late. Their ships were already falling apart. The once mighty fleet that had been poised to crush Earth now seemed vulnerable and small in the face of humanity's resolve. Earth's leaders could only watch as their weapons continued to strike the invaders' fleet. The first wave of attackers had been utterly destroyed within minutes. The scale of the destruction was beyond what the invaders had expected. A number of their ships lay in ruin, floating lifelessly in space. As the surviving Imperial forces tried to regroup, their situation was dire. The attackers realized they were no longer the hunters but the hunted. Humanity's military did not rest on its laurels. Instead, they moved quickly, taking advantage of the chaos within the Imperial fleet. Earth's forces sent out drones that had been previously launched into space. They had been disguised as debris and had evaded the enemy's detection systems, but now they revealed themselves to be highly sophisticated combat units. Once deployed, the drones worked tirelessly, dismantling key Imperial weapon systems from the inside, taking down shield generators and disabling energy cores. These weapons may have been technologically superior to anything Earth had ever known, but humanity's ingenuity was its true weapon. The Empire's ships were now stranded and vulnerable, without the ability to retaliate. Imperial commanders could only watch in horror as their fleet was methodically picked apart by the very people they had come to conquer. They had never imagined such a rapid and efficient response from Earth, and as they struggled to recover, it was becoming clear that their invasion was no longer a sure thing. Humanity had turned the tables, and the fight had only just begun. The Imperial fleet was reeling from the shock of Earth's counterattack. As the final moments of the first wave passed, the commanders were in disarray. No one could explain how a seemingly primitive planet could have such devastating capabilities. The Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds and had never encountered resistance like this. Before, they had expected Earth to fall easily like all the others, but instead they were facing a force unlike anything they had ever imagined. On the ground, Earth's military forces moved swiftly to capitalize on the situation. Now that the invaders were thrown into chaos, humanity was ready to strike again. The global defense network was linked together in a coordinated attack that stretched across the world. Soldiers from every continent stood united as one force, ready to protect their planet. The first wave of destruction from the orbital platforms had given them the upper hand, but it was clear this war was far from over. Humanity had learned long ago that survival wasn't guaranteed. It had to be fought for every inch of ground. Every victory would need to be earned. While the Imperial fleet struggled to regroup, the second wave of Earth's countermeasures came into play. Humanity had designed their weapons for precision and surprise. But it wasn't just technology that was their greatest asset. It was the sheer unpredictability of human thought and action. No one could anticipate the creativity that Earth's people possessed. They weren't just following orders or blindly relying on machines. They were thinking on their feet, adapting to the situation and improvising as the battle unfolded. The invaders tried to regroup and initiate repairs to their fleet, but the damage to their ships was severe. Their advanced shields were gone, and their communication systems were still down. Drones continued to attack their remaining forces from every angle, exploiting any weakness they could find. The Imperial fleet was unable to mount an effective defense. They had no clear leadership and no way to organize a counterattack. Their once mighty warships were now sitting ducks, floating aimlessly through space. Earth's military took advantage of the confusion, sending more drones into space to dismantle the remaining Imperial ships. Piece by piece, the invaders' flagship was targeted next, a massive ship that had once inspired fear across the galaxy. It was said to be indestructible, but the humans had no fear. Their engineers were already at work on a plan to disable it. They knew that if they could take down the flagship, the rest of the fleet would likely crumble. The flagship was heavily guarded But humanity had something the Empire did not understand. Earth's people did not fear failure. They embraced it as an opportunity to learn and grow. The plan to disable the flagship was set in motion with the same relentless determination that had driven Earth's defense effort from the beginning. A team of human engineers aboard a stealth ship infiltrated the Imperial flagship's defenses. They worked quickly, hacking into the ship's control systems and disabling its power core. The process was delicate and dangerous, but they had no choice. Failure was not an option as the power core of the flagship began to power down. The Imperial commanders were caught off guard. They had no idea how their most prized vessel was suddenly immobilized. The flagship's systems went dark one by one, and its massive hull began to drift aimlessly through space. Now, without the leadership of their flagship, the remaining Imperial forces were thrown into even more chaos. Their morale shattered. The Empire's greatest symbol of power was now nothing more than a drifting hulk. Their once unshakable dominance had been broken, and the scale of their defeat was becoming undeniable. As the Imperial fleet struggled to regain control of its remaining forces, the tide of the battle was becoming clear. Humanity had turned the tables in a way no one had predicted. The invaders had expected to conquer Earth in days at most. Now they were fighting to survive, and each move they made only seemed to make their situation worse. The damage to their fleet was catastrophic, and their troops on the ground were ill-prepared for the resistance they faced. Earth's military was relentless and united in a way that the Empire had never experienced before. The soldiers on the ground were proving to be just as effective as the high-tech weapons in space. Their guerrilla tactics had been honed for years. Even in times of peace, human soldiers were prepared for every conceivable situation. And now those skills were on full display across the world. Earth's forces attacked with surgical precision, using urban environments to their advantage. They set traps and ambushes, forcing Imperial ground forces to waste time and resources, while Earth's soldiers slipped away undetected. When the invaders finally realized the full extent of the human resistance, it was already too late. Their losses had mounted, and they were struggling to regroup. One of the most surprising elements of Earth's defense was how quickly civilians had mobilized. The people of Earth were not just passive bystanders in this fight. They were part of the battle. Even those who had never picked up a weapon before now found themselves building fortifications, creating improvised defenses, and helping strategize the next moves. Many had lost their homes to the invaders' initial bombing raids, but instead of cowering in fear, they fought back with everything they had. What the Empire failed to realize was that Earth's people did not back down. When faced with impossible odds, they stood their ground. The Empire's arrogance had made it easy for them to overlook the one thing that would prove to be their downfall: humanity's unyielding will to survive. As the Imperial soldiers advanced into key cities, they were met not by fear, but by the determined resistance of human fighters. Young and old alike, humans fought with a desperation that the Empire could not understand. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and the future of their world. Every street corner, every alley became a battleground, and the invaders found themselves overwhelmed by the sheer number of resistance fighters that seemed to appear from nowhere. Meanwhile, in space, Earth's engineers continued to dismantle the remaining Imperial warships using a combination of high-tech drones and their superior knowledge of the invaders' technology. The Empire's remaining fleets were now scattered and disjointed, unable to effectively defend themselves. Their ships were being picked off one by one, and their command was crumbling. They had no way to communicate effectively, and they were losing ships faster than they could replace them. The final blow came when Earth's forces successfully infiltrated an Imperial supply ship and turned it into a weapon against the rest of the fleet. This ship, which had been carrying valuable resources and reinforcements, was now in the hands of Earth's military, and it was used to launch a series of devastating surprise attacks against the Imperial fleet. The once proud ships of the Empire were now vulnerable, and their systems were being torn apart by the very people they had sought to conquer. The Empire's soldiers began to realize that victory was no longer possible. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, and now they were facing total annihilation. Their flagship had been destroyed, their fleet had been shattered, and their ground forces had been overwhelmed. It was clear that the invasion had failed. The Empire had underestimated the human spirit, and now they were paying the price. With every passing minute, the once invincible Imperial fleet was being torn apart piece by piece. Their ships were no longer the terror of the galaxy. They were drifting hulks caught in a storm of humanity's fury. The invaders were scrambling to regroup, but the coordinated assault from Earth's forces was relentless. Each wave of attack seemed more calculated than the last, and the Empire could not keep up. Their remaining warships tried to evade, but the humans were everywhere now. No corner of space or Earth was safe. On the ground, the Imperial soldiers found themselves retreating. They had thought Earth's cities would fall under their might, but now they were trapped in urban warfare, where every street and building was a fortress. Humanity knew how to fight in their own world, and the Empire's advanced technology did not give them the edge they expected. Every time they advanced, a new group of resistance fighters emerged to push them back. Guerrilla tactics had become the standard, and Imperial forces were forced into a war of attrition that drained their morale and resources. Earth's military forces were not fighting for land or glory, they were fighting for survival, and this difference in motivation was evident in every battle. The invaders had seen entire worlds fall without much effort, but they had not anticipated the sheer will of Earth's people fighting to protect their home. The Imperial soldiers were trained for efficiency and speed, but humanity fought with something deeper, a fire that came from the belief in their right to exist. As the Imperial troops retreated and regrouped, their chain of command fell apart. They could no longer communicate with their forces scattered across the planet, and in space without centralized control, the invaders had no hope of mounting an effective counterattack. Their forces were split, and their supplies dwindled. Their ships were falling apart faster than they could repair them, and the ground forces were increasingly isolated. Their efforts to push into key cities failed as Earth's soldiers kept up the pressure. The invaders were running out of time and options. With every victory on the ground, humanity gained momentum and hope spread across the planet. People who had never considered themselves warriors found themselves standing shoulder to shoulder with soldiers and strategists in a unified effort to drive out the invaders from their world. The streets that had once been filled with fear were now filled with the sounds of unity as the resistance worked together to wipe out the remaining Imperial forces. Meanwhile, in space, Earth's engineers worked tirelessly to finish the final stages of their counteroffensive. As the Imperial fleet lost ships one by one, Earth's forces were able to recover their technology and adapt it for their own use. They used the invaders' weapons against them, and in a stunning move, they began to target the remaining Imperial supply ships. Earth had learned to turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses, and now the Empire was struggling to stay afloat. The Empire's leaders could no longer deny the truth. Their invasion had failed. They had underestimated Earth and the human will to survive. No longer could they call themselves conquerors. Their armies were shattered, their fleet destroyed, and their command structure in ruins. The final remnants of their forces were scattered with no hope of regrouping. Their dreams of galactic domination had been reduced to dust. The Empire's leadership was in a state of denial, even as their fleets disintegrated and their ground forces crumbled. They had never expected defeat to come so swiftly, so decisively. Their arrogance had led them to believe that no force in the universe could stand against them, but now they were witnessing their once mighty empire unravel before their very eyes. On Earth, the people were not celebrating just yet. They knew that the war was far from over. While the Imperial forces were broken, they still had pockets of resistance scattered across the globe, and the remaining Imperial warships in space still posed a threat. Humanity had won crucial battles, but the final victory was still out of reach. Earth's military leaders focused on one thing, and one thing only: complete annihilation of the Imperial presence on their planet. The final push to drive the invaders from their world had begun. The global resistance was more organized than ever before. Cities that had once been occupied by Imperial forces were now liberated and under the control of Earth's defenders. The human military had been able to adapt their tactics quickly and efficiently. Each victory strengthened their resolve, and the once fractured resistance now operated like a well-oiled machine. Military leaders from every nation worked together, their differences set aside for the common goal of reclaiming their world. The Empire's once pristine war machines were no match for the tenacity and unity of humanity. The Imperial forces that remained on the ground were now scattered and retreating. They no longer held the strategic positions they once had, and their numbers were dwindling with every skirmish. The remaining soldiers had little hope left. Their morale had been shattered by the failures of their command and the onslaught from humanity's fighters. Those that tried to make a stand were quickly overwhelmed as Earth's forces pressed forward relentlessly. Imperial commanders attempted to coordinate some form of defense, but their orders were falling on deaf ears. Their soldiers no longer believed in their cause, and desertions were rampant. In space, the last vestiges of the Imperial fleet drifted aimlessly. They had no fuel, no command structure, and no way to fight back against the human forces that continued to dismantle them one ship at a time. Earth's engineers had perfected their methods for disabling Imperial ships, and now they turned their attention to the few remaining warships in orbit. The once feared Imperial cruisers were being picked apart by Earth's advanced drones and fighter crafts, which had been modified with the knowledge gained from the invaders' technology. Each shot from Earth's ships was precise and deadly. The final moments for the Imperial fleet came when Earth's forces launched a series of surprise attacks on the last remaining supply ships, which were essential to keeping the invaders operational. These supply ships were heavily guarded, but even they could not withstand the coordinated assault from Earth's forces. The supply ships were destroyed, and the final thread of hope for the invaders was severed. Their fleet had no way to recover without supplies or reinforcements, and their leadership had failed them. Earth's forces had secured victory in the skies, and on the ground the Empire had been defeated. But even in their moment of triumph, humanity remained vigilant. There were still pockets of invaders to clean up. There were still remnants of the Empire that needed to be hunted down and eradicated. The war was over, but the cleanup would take time. The human spirit had proven stronger than the Empire had ever imagined, but the scars of battle would remain. As Earth's forces continued to dismantle the remnants of the Imperial invaders, humanity began to realize the full scale of what they had accomplished. It wasn't just a military victory. It was a testament to their strength, unity, and resolve. They had taken on an empire that had conquered countless worlds and had never once been challenged in such a manner. But now the Empire was no more. Their ships were reduced to debris. Their ground forces were scattered and broken. Their once feared commanders were prisoners or had fled into the dark corners of space. The people of Earth were left to rebuild what had been destroyed. But even as the dust settled, there was no mistaking the significance of what had happened. Their world had been invaded by an enemy they had never seen coming, and in the face of impossible odds they had risen to meet the challenge together. Humanity had defeated an enemy far more advanced in technology and war tactics, but it was their unity and will to survive that had carried them through. The cleanup process was no small task. Remnants of Imperial forces still hid in remote areas across the planet, and the occasional pockets of resistance were met with swift retribution from Earth's military. But there was something more important than just eradicating the invaders left behind. It was the need for the world to come together and heal the scars of war. Every nation now stood united as they worked to rebuild their cities and infrastructures. The war had shown them the power of cooperation and the importance of looking beyond borders to protect their shared future. Earth's leaders called for unity among all nations as the process of rebuilding began. The people who had fought side by side with soldiers, engineers, doctors, and civilians alike now turned their attention to the challenges of reconstruction. It wasn't just about rebuilding what was lost, it was about creating a world that could never again be so easily threatened. They had learned lessons from this war that would shape their future for generations to come. Technology was integrated into every aspect of their society, but it was tempered with the wisdom of experience. Meanwhile, in space, Earth's forces did not let their guard down entirely. Though the Imperial fleet was gone, they understood the vastness of space and the possibility of future threats. A watchful eye was maintained as military and civilian engineers worked together to develop new defense systems that were even more advanced than before. They had learned from the enemy's mistakes and had adapted those lessons into their own strategies. Earth was no longer the unsuspecting planet that had been caught off guard. Now, it stood as a force to be reckoned with, one that would never again be so vulnerable. The survivors of the Empire were not all lost. Some had been taken captive and were brought to Earth for trial. Many had never questioned the orders they had been given, and some were genuinely remorseful for their role in the invasion. But the leaders of the Empire would face no mercy. Earth had shown no hesitation in its retaliation, and the consequences of the invasion were swift and final. The prisoners were held accountable for the destruction they had caused and the harm they had inflicted upon a world that had simply been trying to survive. Earth's final victory was not just in the defeat of the invaders, but in the transformation of the planet itself. It was no longer a backwater world lost in the depths of space. It was a symbol of resistance and hope for every other civilization that might face similar threats. The invaders had come for conquest, but they had found something far more powerful in humanity, something they could never have anticipated. As the years passed since the invasion, humanity's victory became a defining moment in history, a turning point that shaped the course of their future. The world was no longer the same. It was a planet that had faced destruction, but had risen stronger from it. The scars of the war were still visible in some places, but they served as a reminder of what humanity had overcome and what they had learned together. Earth's newfound unity began to extend beyond just the boundaries of the planet. Nations that had once fought among themselves now stood side by side. In the wake of the invasion, they had seen the dangers of division and understood that only through cooperation could they ensure the safety of their world. They formed a global council that represented all nations and put forth policies to prevent future conflicts and to promote peace among the stars. Humanity had no illusions about the challenges that lay ahead. They knew that the galaxy was vast and filled with dangers that they could not yet comprehend, but they also knew that they were no longer a defenseless planet. The global defense network that had been instrumental in the war against the Empire was not dismantled. Instead, it was expanded and refined. It was no longer just a shield for Earth. It was now a beacon of strength that reached into space and watched over their solar system. As humanity's technological capabilities grew, so did their ability to monitor and protect themselves from potential threats. The lessons learned from the Empire's invasion were woven into every new defense system, every policy, and every plan for the future. With the victory over the Empire, humanity's position in the galaxy had shifted. They were no longer seen as a vulnerable backwater world, but as a rising power. Their success in repelling the invaders had spread across the stars as a message to other civilizations that humanity would not be easily conquered. They had proven that no matter the odds, they would fight to protect their home and their people. The defeat of the Empire also sparked a new era of exploration. Humanity no longer feared the unknown. They had faced an enemy that had once seemed invincible and had overcome them. Now they looked to the stars with curiosity and determination. Space exploration began to expand rapidly as humans sent probes and ships to distant planets and moons. Their scientific knowledge grew at an unprecedented rate, and they began to build relationships with other species in the galaxy who saw humanity not as a primitive race, but as a worthy ally and partner. As for the remnants of the Empire, some chose to flee into the vast reaches of space, while others stayed behind and tried to rebuild their shattered empire. But none could ever forget the lesson that humanity had taught them: the power of unity and the strength of a people determined to protect their world, no matter the cost. The galaxy had learned to respect Earth and its people. Humanity's victory over the Empire was not just about survival. It was about proving that even the smallest voice could stand up against the greatest of powers, and that no force in the universe could crush the spirit of those willing to fight for what was right. The war was over, but the story of Earth's rise had only just begun.